Welcome back to Good Work Now. I'm Dr. Brian Moffitt. One of our crew members, Bobby Waldo, was playing with this Rubik's Cube just a few seconds ago, and it inspired me to use this as the opening of the show. I have never been successful with the Rubik's Cube, but I think it requires some degree of intelligence to do this, and maybe I have just average intelligence, which is fine with me. It's good enough. But there's another factor too. When you're doing a Rubik's Cube, there may be a level of frustration, a level of anger, a level of fear that you're not good enough or something like that. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's not just the intelligence stuff that we've all heard about, like IQ scores and our capacity to learn, but it's about the emotions that we have, being aware of them, and how do we manage them so we can be happy and successful in our work and personal lives. I am very pleased to welcome to our show today Dr. Mitchel Adler. He is a licensed clinical psychologist, creator of Mind-Body Intelligence, MBI, and director of Mind-Body Intelligence Consulting based in Davis, California, where he also has a psychotherapy practice for individuals and groups. And he's co-author of the book, Promoting Intelligence in Organizations. And I'll put the information up on the screen. And welcome, Mitchel, to the show. I'm so glad you could be here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
This is a very interesting topic, the whole notion of emotional intelligence. And today we're going to talk about what is emotional intelligence and why it's important for folks to be in touch with that. Why talk about this thing called emotional intelligence? And then talk about some specific things that you can do to improve your emotional intelligence so you can be more successful in your daily lives. So let's start, Mitchel, with the first area. What is emotional intelligence, or EI?
Yes, it's a good question. And like most things, it's both incredibly simple and very complex. It's a dialectic between the two. So the simple one I'll give you first.
Okay.
Emotional intelligence is the ability to make healthy, adaptive choices based on being able to identify, understand, and manage our own emotions and the emotions of others.
Okay.
That's the nice simple definition.
Okay.
The more complex definition,
Okay,
that comes a little bit more, which talks about emotional intelligence as 4 different domains of intelligence.
Okay.
And within those 4 domains, there are 19 competencies.
Wow.
Yes. So I can just give you the 4.
Let's go
start
with
off
the,
with-
right,
yeah,
the
let's start
4
with the 4.
domains. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to get into the 19
Exactly.
today.
That's another show.
That's another show, exactly. So the 4 competencies are self-awareness.
Okay.
And I can go through each one of them kind of briefly.
Okay.
But it's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills.
Okay.
Those are your 4 basic domains.
Okay, so let's an example of the first one, self-awareness. What might that be?
So self-awareness is about knowing our own internal states.
Okay.
It's understanding our emotions. For instance, most people don't realize this, but we have actually 4 basic emotions. There's some research out there that says there are 5 or 6, but the good research that I've read is really about 4.
Okay.
And the 4 basic emotions are mad, sad, glad, and scared.
Okay.
And if you pretty much know that, then you can slowly learn to understand your own emotional world, because all of our emotions fall within a continuum of each of those emotions,
Okay.
or they're combinations of one or more of those
Exactly, like
emotions.
jealousy, for example. It's
Exactly.
probably some sad, some mad, and maybe a little scared.
Exactly.
A
That's a
combination.
great example of
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And what's the second domain? An example of the second domain?
The second domain would be self-management.
Okay.
This is our ability to manage our own internal resources and to manage our impulses. So it helps us to be able to be adaptable in different environments. That's a competency. The ability to have self-control.
Okay.
The ability to be able to have initiative and follow up on activities that you think you want to do, you actually do them.
Okay.
So folks high in that competency, and things like achievement drive.
Oh, okay. And so there may be some folks out there who are concerned about their impulsiveness,
Yes.
for example, and being aware that, oh, when I get this emotion, I tend to act this way very quickly.
That's right. So folks who are high in that competency recognize in advance, oh, I react in this kind of environment in a certain way. So I know what my triggers are, and they can learn how to self-soothe and then be able to communicate what they need in an effective manner, as opposed to just exploding or internalizing or avoiding.
Okay. And then the third domain?
The third domain would be social awareness. Now, this is one's ability to be aware of others' needs, feelings, and concerns.
Okay.
And things like empathy, which is the foundation of social awareness, the ability to experience someone else's feelings. as well as organizational awareness, where there are some folks out there who can just naturally read a room. They walk into a room and they can tell, when is it okay to make a joke? Should I lean back? Who in this room
Exactly.
has power? And who in this room, is more the follower? These people can really pick up on that with this
And I think also
competency.
too, maybe most folks can probably sense there's a tension in the room, like the
Yes,
elephant that no one's talking about.
exactly.
So folks with this competency probably can sense that energy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they can be aware of it, and then they can actually name it at the right time,
Right.
because timing
Right.
is everything.
So that relates to the prior domain, managing it. So maybe you're sensing there's an elephant in the room, but maybe now is not the right time to put it on the table
Exactly.
or label it or name it.
Perfectly.
And then the fourth one.
The fourth one is social skills,
Okay.
which is really about the ability to have influence, the ability to induce desirable behaviors in others. This is leadership, this is conflict management, this is communication strategies, and the ability to build teams and collaborations within teams so that you can work together to reach a certain goal.
Okay. And I imagine each one of us as individuals have different strengths and weaknesses around these 4 dimensions.
Absolutely.
So maybe as viewers are watching, they can kind of do a self-assessment and get in touch with maybe areas that they're strong in and to leverage those strengths and areas that maybe they need to look at.
That would be exactly what I would recommend. to
Okay,
viewers.
great. That'd be a
Yes.
great outcome for the show.
Because it really promotes self-awareness, what you're describing, which is the foundation of emotional intelligence. Without self-awareness, you really can't do much else with emotional intelligence, because
okay.
we have to use ourselves as the ultimate tool.
So that's like a prerequisite skill.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about, this might be obvious, but why is emotional intelligence important in the workplace?
Well, it's interesting, because I think the challenge has been that it hasn't been so obvious to a lot of folks, which is why we wrote this book, Promoting Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. We wanted to prove that emotional intelligence training actually is effective. The
Okay.
reason why it's effective is because it can be learned.
Mm.
As opposed to something like IQ, which is a stable trait along the lifespan. It's very difficult to raise someone's IQ.
Okay.
You can actually improve someone's emotional intelligence with training.
Mm.
And it depends on a number of factors. That is, the degree to which someone is ready for the change, that they're motivated to be changing, that they have a desire. But it is absolutely something that can be changed. And the reason why it's so effective is because it impacts the bottom line of organizations.
Exactly.
So the research that we've done is we found that there were 15 model programs that were implementing emotional intelligence training.
Okay.
And we found that these programs, which had rigorous research criteria with control groups and training and follow-up evaluations, that bottom line factors like productivity was increased as a result of the training, decreased absenteeism, decreased workers' grievances, workers' compensation, and decrease in health problems. Organizations are having to adjust and adapt to many changes, whether it's budget cuts or reductions in employees, and emotional intelligence helps us to make better decisions and adapt more effectively to change.
What change is all about is it produces discomfort for
Yes.
folks. Like the old exercise of putting a watch on the other wrist.
Yes.
You feel
yes.
very awkward, or walking on a different side of the street that you normally do, or sleeping on a different side of the bed, or changing your routine at work, or changing a work process. They all cause some emotions.
Yes.
So I can imagine, in terms of being more ready for change, either personally or organizationally, improving your emotional intelligence is going to serve you well.
Absolutely. Because what it does is it helps us adapt to change and
Exactly.
to stress. Because stress is, the definition of stress is the having to adapt to a changing environment and coping with our skills. And you're right, we are always having to adapt to change, and emotional intelligence helps us do
Exactly,
it.
especially with the work environment changing. We just did a show last time on the future of work, and the level of change is accelerating. And
Yes.
then that new generation of the millennials coming into the workplace, bringing all their new ideas.
That's right.
And technology and so forth. There's going to be a lot of change
That's a
happening.
tremendous amount of change with that younger generation moving in.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And they're also working so much more in teams.
Exactly.
And when you're working with teams, you're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with emotions, and you're dealing with relationships. And emotional intelligence is really the foundation. It's about relationships and managing them.
And it's not just at work, it's also at home, too.
Oh, yes.
With your family.
Oh, yes. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old and a
Right,
wife, and my
right.
emotional intelligence comes in handy, although I'm no expert.
Exactly.
I'm an expert at teaching it, and I'm always aspiring to do it
Well,
better
we're all
myself.
human,
That's right.
so we all
That's
try
right.
to work on being aware of our emotions and how to best manage them.
Yes.
Let's discuss some specific ways employees, teams, or organizations can put some positive energy into improving their emotional intelligence. What's some ways that people can learn emotional intelligence?
Well, some of the best ways to teach emotional intelligence is by experience.
Okay.
So it's very good to offer people didactic information, but they have to be able to use the information in an experiential way. So whenever I do any kind of emotional intelligence training, I'm always thinking I want to give them information and data, and then I want them to go out and practice.
Okay.
And the practice can take place within the actual training itself, but more importantly, it has to happen outside of the training. Folks have to take what they are learning in the experience and bring it out and practice in the world. Come back to the training. What worked? What didn't work?
Okay.
Readjust. Learn a little bit more. Go back out into the environment. The research seems to support that one-time workshops don't have a long-term impact on behavioral change. And emotional intelligence is very similar that way. We're not looking at changing someone's ability to do Microsoft Excel, or we're teaching them how to actually better manage their anger, or to be assertive, or to be able to be more compassionate and empathic. These are skills that are deeply ingrained in the human system. They need repeated exposure and repeated opportunities in order to do it. So that's an essential component, is having it be experiential.
Right, so the opportunity to practice, apply, and then come back and have a discussion or debrief or process the experience.
That's right.
To reinforce some of the information and try again a different way.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
The most predictive of all 19 competencies is achievement drive.
Oh, okay.
Now, achievement drive is the ability for individuals to persist in the attainment of a goal despite setbacks and obstacles.
Okay.
And the reason why, obviously, this is such an important competency is because we're always dealing with situations where we potentially fail and make mistakes. And the achievement drive folks, people who are high in this competency, they don't give up.
They're resilient.
That's right. They're resilient. So when they have a setback, they know how to take care of themselves without falling into sort of a self-criticism. They don't give up. There's a great story about Edison. Can I give you this little anecdote? So there's this anecdote about Edison that he had tried over 1,000 different elements to create the filament for the incandescent light bulb. And he was interviewed, and they said, "What was it like to have tried 1,000 different materials and who have failed every time?" And he said, "I never failed. I succeeded at finding what didn't work."
Oh, so his frame, the way he looked at it, his approach,
was
exactly
different.
Right.
It's an attitude that allowed him in some way to build this internal resistance that his achievement, he was never going to not find that filament. He would die before he not found it, and he would still feel like he didn't fail because he wouldn't even know he didn't make it because he'd be dead.
So it's
I mean, sorry to say, but fortunately he found it.
Well, actually, I think I was going to ask you a question. I think you kind of answered it, that resilience, I think some folks assume, many of us probably, that resilience is something you're born with. It's your DNA, it's your genetic makeup. But it sounds like you can really learn how to be more achievement oriented or more resilient.
Oh, absolutely.
And one way is simply by what do you say to yourself? What's your self-talk? How do you frame the situation?
That's right. And I think it's a combination of nature and nurture. And I think early childhood is an important time because our early attachments are incredibly important for feeling a secure base. So the folks who feel a secure base because they had, let's say, attentive parents who were able to mirror their own emotions, mirror the child's emotions, so that the child didn't feel overwhelmed or ashamed of how they felt, and felt like it's okay to have these feelings. These folks grow up with more confidence that allows them to be more successful when they do have some kind of setback. Like we say, that will always happen. We all have setbacks and mistakes and failures. It's how do we pick ourselves back up and keep going.
So there's like a preparation. Yes. That people are prepared for what could happen in terms of emotionally for them, and not being so afraid of it. When you're flooded with an emotional sensation, it's not so overwhelming.
And the fear, that's an interesting point, because we can't control our fear in as far as having the fear. What we can control is what we do with the fear.
Exactly.
So we're all going to feel scared. In fact, I would say that people who are considered courageous, it's not the people who are not courageous are the ones who are not scared. It's the people who are scared but do what they're afraid of anyway. Because if you're not scared, then what are you being brave about? We all have fear, and it's important to recognize our fear. Our fear is data. Emotions are data for us to make sense of what's happening in our environment. So we want to be able to acknowledge that we have fear. The question is, can we use that data, that fear, to help us understand what's happening to us so that we can then make an informed choice and a decision to whether confront it, or maybe it is so scary or dangerous that we need to move away from it.
Exactly. I think what you're getting at is the whole self-awareness piece, which is I think that's a prerequisite competency area.
Yes.
And so it sounds like folks need to be really in touch with their emotions and when they pop up. So when at work, for example,
Yes.
when at work do I get angry? When at work do I get sad?
Yes.
When at work do I get glad? And when at work do I get scared? And then if folks just spend some time reflecting on those four things, that is going to sharpen their self-awareness muscle a little bit.
Absolutely.
Would that work? Okay.
And I can give you another technique that folks can use
Okay.
to really bring this to life, because that's exactly what I would want them to do, is be thinking about their emotions and what is triggering them.
Okay.
But a great technique that they can use is called a subjective state of being scale, a SOBS scale. It's a scale from 1 to 100.
Okay.
Yeah, and SOBS is a kind of funny thing. It sounds kind
Another
of sad.
acronym.
Yeah, it sounds kind of sad too. But subjective state of being, the operative term here is subjective. It's a scale from 1 to 100.
Okay.
Where we have people think about how they're feeling in the current moment, like right this minute. So when I give a talk or I give a workshop, I'll have people do this right off the bat because it's such a good self-awareness tool. Here's the way the scale is organized. Number 1, on a scale of 1 to 100, 1 is the most relaxed and calm you've ever been. It could be for some sitting in Hawaii, enjoying a Mai Tai, watching the waves come in with their partner of choice, and feel just very relaxed and good. 100 is the most stressed out you could ever be in your life. It's jumping out of an airplane and realizing you don't have a parachute. I mean, we're talking about super stressed, right? And a 50 is our baseline. It's how we are on a general daily basis.
Okay.
Now, most people don't know what those numbers are for themselves. They don't know what their 50 is. We want people to know what their number is.
Exactly.
So I'll ask someone, what is your number right now? And oftentimes they'll give me a number like, oh, I'm a 25 or I'm a 85 or 95. And I'll help them raise some awareness. I'm like, what makes you think you're an 85? How are you getting this data? And they have to check in with themselves.
Exactly.
Because how do we get the data? We have to look at our body. What's happening physiologically inside of us? What are we saying to ourselves? What are our thoughts or cognitions? And how are we feeling emotionally? And those are the data points that they are having to glean from their mind-body system in order to get this number. And it's helping them to do that. So I encourage people to do that at least 3 times a day.
Okay.
For at least the first week.
So this is 3 data points, it sounds like.
Exactly.
The emotional state, the physiological state.
Yes.
And then what was
the cognitive state, the thoughts.
Are they all equal? Or does it depend on the individual in terms of...
Excellent question.
Okay.
It is very subjective.
Okay.
So some folks will manifest very physiologically their emotional state and their distress. For instance, I can feel things very, very viscerally in my chest. When I feel anxious, it goes right to my chest. And I know I feel it before I even think it.
Okay.
Now, there are other folks who are so cut off from their body that they feel it or they experience it more intellectually. They start ruminating or thinking over and over again. And for others, they'll just kind of feel overwhelmed with an emotion.
Okay.
So it really depends on you. And it's okay. All of these are data points to get the information that we need. And it doesn't matter which one we really access first. We just want to know how they all
What's
work
the
inside
overall
of us.
barometer? What's
That's
the
right.
overall reading for me at this moment? Good. Okay.
Yes.
How can... Let's talk about self-confidence, which is so important. I think you hinted at this a little bit already. Is self-confidence teachable? We've all heard about workshops where folks in one workshop or one book, you read a book, you're going to be self-confident. Or is it Tony Robbins?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Some of that stuff, where,
Yes.
I'm not dismissing that stuff isn't helpful. But what's your thoughts about self-confidence and how it relates to emotional intelligence, and can we improve our self-confidence?
Yes. So self-confidence is another one of the competencies. It's under the self-awareness domain.
Okay.
And self-confidence is essential because self-confidence is about having a sense of your own self-value and self-worth. When we don't feel like we have self-worth or self-value, we cannot step into ourselves and step into a situation where we can initiate and assert who we are and what we need.
Okay.
And when we can't do that, we can't own our experience. And then when we have some kind of setback, which we keep saying is inevitably going to happen, people can't recover. Now, I want to help people have realistic self-confidence because there's a problem with people who are overly self-confident because that can get in their way too. That's narcissism, that's grandiosity, and oftentimes I'm sure you've experienced folks who are so self-confident that
arrogance.
It's arrogance, exactly. And so I'm not talking about that at all.
Right.
I'm talking about actually just honoring who we are and our sense of self. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I like to use the example of training a puppy. If you ever had a puppy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I have
a very challenging
Yes.
training situation, but...
That's right. So we'll use this as an example. When potty training a puppy, we find a place where the puppy is supposed to go to the bathroom. It could be the newspaper in the garage or a certain area in the backyard. Now, the worst thing that you can do when you're trying to train a puppy is when you catch it in the act of doing what it's supposed to do, which is go to the bathroom, and then you berate it and yell at it, So you catch the dog going to the bathroom where it's not supposed to go, even though it doesn't know any better. It's just a little speck of dust whizzing through the universe doing the best it can with whatever it's got. We yell, "No, you're a bad dog, bad." This is what happens to the dog. It feels scared and confused. And if anything, it's going to think that going to the bathroom is a bad thing. You don't want puppies thinking going to the bathroom is a bad thing. So what we want to do in this situation is we want to capture the dog doing what it's supposed to be doing where it's not supposed to be doing it. And then, this may sound a little weird, but you then pick it up and bring it where it's supposed to be.
The dog.
That's right. Yeah, that's right, the dog. Preferably in the act.
Okay.
Put it where it's supposed to be. And then we praise it. We tell it how good it is for doing what it's supposed to be doing where it's supposed to be doing it. And I tell people that we have to treat ourselves the same way. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to fall off tasks. We are going to be confused in the world. And that's totally okay. What we need to do when we catch ourselves in the act of it is to bring ourselves back to our focus and to do it as compassionately, as gently as possible. Because when we have an internalized sense that we can treat ourselves with that kind of compassion, we can tolerate anything.
Right.
When we have this internal critical sense that we have to be perfect, we are basically our own worst enemy. And it takes away our ability to be the assertive person that we need to be in the world.
So not being self-critical is very important.
That's right. And avoiding perfectionism. As a recovering perfectionist myself, we need to obliterate perfectionism from our world. It doesn't actually help us. It's problematic.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about empathy building.
Yes.
And this is another one of those myths, I think, out there that either you have it or you don't have empathy. And some folks, I hear the argument, some folks have no insight. You know, they're very narcissistic or self-centered or self-serving. How can one learn to have more empathy with others?
Yes.
Seems very tough.
It is tough. Empathy, I think, is one of the more difficult things to teach to folks, although it's absolutely teachable.
Okay.
First, let's define what empathy is. Empathy is the ability to notice and have concern about others' needs, feelings, and concerns.
Okay.
So it's really being able to step inside someone else's shoes and be interested and concerned about what that experience is like. People forget about the interest and concern that comes with empathy. They just think, oh, it's like knowing how you feel. And that's a part of it, but it's also being interested and concerned. As a manager, we need to be able to be interested and concerned in our employees, because the more information we get from our employees about what's going on for them, the more we're able to help them become as good of an employee as they can be. When they don't trust us and they feel like they have to hide from us, and they don't feel like we're going to be sympathetic or empathetic to them, then we won't get the data that we need. So the way that we teach it is, number one, we make it very clear to folks how important it is, because they have to buy into the fact that being empathic is actually an effective tool for behavioral change in the employees that we have, and also among our peers. What I like to do is I like to have people sit and share a challenge. So I'll break folks up into pairs.
Okay.
And I'll say, share a challenge that you're having at work with another partner right here, and it'll be confidential between the two of you. What I want the person who's listening to do is to just listen. No speaking. You can give a nonverbal, smile or nod of the head.
I'm doing.
That's right. Exactly. You're doing a very nice job. But I want you to just listen and be present. And you do this. I literally do it for 1 minute. I set a timer and I do it for 1 minute. And it is amazing how powerful it is when it's over, that these folks sat for 1 minute just listening. What it was like for the listener to listen, and what it was like as the person who was speaking to be listened to, to not be interrupted. And it shifts something for some folks. Just this one time, of course, they need a lot of practice, but this one time opens their eyes to how amazing it feels to have someone's true attention right there. To not feel like they're going to say, oh, well, that's just like me, or that reminds me of last week when I went to this. It's giving someone really their focus and attention, and how powerful it is, and how connecting it is, and how much you can really learn from the person from just being present.
Exactly. So listening can be more powerful than speaking.
Absolutely.
For sure. And I think we always minimize the listening part of communication.
Yes.
Well, listening is 10%, and then the other 90% I have to be verbalizing all the time. And having that balance of speaking and listening at the same time. Actually, you mentioned managers and employees. One of the things that we know from motivational studies is that if managers are truly checking in with their employees and knowing their lives, not just what they're doing with their job, but how their kids are doing, how's grandma?
Yes.
How's the car that broke last week?
Yes.
That kind of thing. And really sincerely being interested and concerned about your employees' lives, their whole lives, really makes a difference in terms of employee motivation. So that a practical example of how emotional intelligence can affect productivity.
That's right.
Let's talk about the role of communication with emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts about? We talked a little bit about listening already. Anything else about communication that you want to address?
Well, with communication, it's a very good thing to address because 2/3 of this is a Newsweek study that I recall reading. They did a poll, and 2/3 of employees say that communication is the number one problem in their workplace. Communication with their management and management with employees is the number one complaint among U.S. employees.
Wow.
So communication is essential for folks, and that's how we get things done, is communication. And what I like to teach is the difference between a dialogue and a debate, which for a lot of folks, I think they really don't grasp. Most of the time when people are trying to communicate with one another, they're trying to prove their point. And we think that by proving our point, then we get respect because, hey, I made my point. But actually, what most people are interested in is a dialogue. And I'll try to give you maybe a sense of what the difference is between the two. Okay. In a debate, we're trying to win our argument. We have a paradigm that's set up, and the paradigm is this. There's a right or wrong. I'm right, you're wrong.
Right.
I'm going to prove that I'm right, and I'm going to prove that you are wrong. In a dialogue, we focus on a similar and different paradigm, where I have a different perspective from you, and I'm going to try to share my perspective, and I really want to understand what your perspective is.
Exactly.
Because in a dialogue, we can actually learn some solution that we never could have imagined could have been present if we were just fighting for our one point of view.
Exactly. It seems like with dialogue, it's more of an exploration. It's more of an adventure.
That's right.
Whereas with debate, it's kind of a hollow victory.
It can
in
be,
a
that's
way,
right.
Where there's so much more learning and understanding that can come through a dialogue process. Mitchell, I want to thank you so much for this very invigorating conversation about emotional intelligence. I wish we had some more time. Maybe you can come back sometime and we can explore some of these 18, 19 competencies.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to come back. This was a lot of fun.
With emotional intelligence. Let me go ahead and provide some contact information for Mitchell. His website is www.mindbodyintelligence.com. And his email is adler@mindbodyintelligence.com. And his phone number is 530-219-5985. And next time, we're going to be talking about toxic coworkers. So today's show was a really good foundation in terms of understanding emotions, our emotions, and how we manage them in the workplace. And now next week we're going to talk about how to use some of those skills in terms of dealing with what you perceive to be toxic coworkers in your environment. And until then, keep up the good work, and thank you so much for watching.